This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Matt Addison with Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and David Lynch alongside me. Diogo Jota is back, but there's now another major injury worry for Jurgen Klopp to deal with, as Jordan Henderson is ruled out for at least a month. No Fabinho or James Milner for Sunday night against Sheffield United either, it seems, given they'll not be back in training in Kirkby until Saturday. So plenty for us to get stuck into. It feels, Gorsty, like injuries so often this season are where we're going to have to start the podcast. Jordan Henderson out for a month. The hope is that he can play again this season, but this is a big, big blow, isn't it, for Liverpool's top four chances?
It is, yeah, no question. And Jurgen Klopp made that point in his press conference, didn't he, when he said it's not just kind of the numbers of players that you're losing, it's what they can bring in terms of their leadership to the pitch. So you think Liverpool are without, currently they're three captains, aren't they? Obviously, the club captain is now out for 6 to 8 weeks. James Milner, the vice captain, his absence goes on, and of course they haven't had Virgil van Dijk since the middle of October. So on top of their ability, you know, as footballers, they've also lost that kind of key voice in the dressing room at important times before games, you know, at half time and whatever else, and obviously on the pitch as well. But I think with the Henderson one, I mean, fair play to anyone who can still kind of get annoyed and frustrated by injury updates and injury news, because it's water off a duck's back now. I think for a lot of people, they're just kind of so beaten into submission by it all. It's just almost a collective shrug, and it's, oh well, you know, is another player injured, and what? Who's going to be next? It's just kind of never ending. It's unrelenting, and I think Klopp's expression said it all, didn't it? When Henderson went down during the derby, he just kind of had this look on his face that was a smile. It was almost it almost feels like even he's been beaten down by it all. He's just like, well, what can you do? Because if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. And Liverpool are now without Jordan Henderson for 6 to 8 weeks, and Liverpool are not putting a time frame on it, but they have said that, you know, he's going to be out until at least after the March international break, which is a month away. So hopefully he's back early to mid-April, and he can hit the ground running at a crucial time in the season, because there's no doubt that Liverpool are going to miss him.
Yeah, I mean, at least a month out, that would guarantee that he's going to be missing Joe for 5 matches for Liverpool. I mean, it's 5, I suppose, all games that at this stage are important, aren't they, as Liverpool try and get into that top 4. But, you know, potentially looking beyond that, you're looking at a Champions League quarterfinals, potentially. You're looking at a Chelsea. Big games coming up for Liverpool, and they're going to be, unfortunately, without their captain for those.
I'm on mute, sorry. Yeah, it's exactly how Gorst said, really. It's funny, isn't it? Because I've been so beaten down by injuries this season that, you know, when Henderson went down in the derby, you just sort of did. You just knew it was never going to be a quick one, was it? It was never going to be a week or two. It was always going to be much longer than that. And yeah, I mean, it's a massive blow, I think. You know, if you look at the reaction this week, it's kind of almost passed unnoticed, this injury. But to me, it's one of their worst ones, because at a time when they haven't got Van Dijk, who's, you know, one of their main leaders on the pitch, they've lost their most vocal player in Henderson. And I mean, he was doing such a good job at centre half, and we were all hoping he could get back into midfield. And just at the time it started to look like he might be able to do that, they denied him. So, you know, it just goes from bad to worse for Liverpool. And yeah, I think they'll miss him big time, and I think it could be another massive test for them now. You know, if they're going to get into the top 4, they're going to have to do it without arguably their most influential player. So hugely disappointing. But as Gorst said, it's just this season's you've just almost gotten used to it. And you know, when you know, you see today that it could be a month, maybe 2 months max, you sort of at least go, well, at least it's not 6 months. You know, I think so many injuries seem to be that bad that, like, you're just looking on the bright side. So with a bit of luck, he's back there sooner rather than later. But, you know, the game's coming so thick and fast, he's going to miss a large chunk of them, even the injuries that don't seem to be as serious, in inverted commas. They seem to miss a large chunk of games, don't they? So it's just another blow. But Liverpool are just so used to dealing with them this season, they'll just have to crack on. But hopefully they can get Milner, Fabinho, those other ones back sooner rather than later to try and compensate a little bit. No.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of central defenders missing already, David. It's a position that Liverpool can't really afford any more injuries, but they've got this one now to compound that. I mean, you don't want any player to get injuries. You know it's part and parcel of the game. But was Jordan Henderson possibly the worst possible player for Liverpool to lose at this stage of the season?
Yeah, I think so. Just because, you were thinking Fabinho is fairly close. I know it's in doubt whether he sort of makes the next game, but the idea is that he'd at least be back for the next one after that. And so you were looking forward to him coming back because you knew that would then mean you could put Fabinho and Kabak in at centre half. The hope is then to have them through to the end of the season. And then Jordan Henderson could go back into midfield for the rest of the season. And then you start thinking, okay, well, Liverpool can put out a pretty strong team on paper. But then, of course, typical of the season, as soon as Fabinho gets close to getting back, you lose Henderson for 4 to 6 weeks is the shout at the moment. But given the way that Liverpool have gone about managing injuries this season and, the time scales they've put on them at times, you wouldn't be surprised if it was a little bit longer than that even. So, it's a huge blow because I think you just significantly weakened the team that Liverpool can put out on paper for the rest of the season. And I think the top 4 chances were already in doubt. But I think this actually might be the final nail in the coffin because I just think he's such a massive player, and the idea of getting him back into midfield would have been such a big boost. But now that's gone, I just think Liverpool have got too much to manage in terms of problems in the team and the structure of the team that they're not going to be able to get over the line, really, in my opinion.
We're going to come on to Sheffield United shortly, Gorsty, but it does leave Liverpool very, very sparse in terms of their options there. Obviously, Fabinho doesn't look like he's going to be back. He's only going to have a maximum of one training session before that match. So what happens now? Is it just a case of Nat Phillips coming in there? Is there an opportunity now for Ben Davies? How do you think Jurgen Klopp might look at this one?
It's a tough choice, isn't it? Because it's neither player are screaming top quality to you, if we're being honest. I mean, that might be a bit harsh on Ben Davies, who's yet to play a game, obviously, but he's been at the club nearly a month now, and we've yet to see a minute of him. They did bring him in from the Championship, taking full advantage of a contract situation, so they didn't have to pay out big fees, and that was sadly is kind of where Liverpool were at in the transfer window at a time when they really needed something. A little bit of a statement in response to the succession of injuries, particularly, the concentration of them in centre half as well. So, it's looking like it's possibly going to be Nat Phillips alongside Kabak, and Kabak's had a little bit of a difficult time, particularly against Everton. So far since he's come in, he's looked solid at times. Other times he's looked a little bit suspect, and that's perhaps understandable for the 20-year-old who's only been at Liverpool a few weeks, but. It needs must, I think, for Liverpool now, and it's going to be a 19th centre-back partnership, is it? For whoever starts. So I think Phillips is, just looking at Nat Phillips, he's probably not up to Liverpool standard, but he hasn't really done a whole lot wrong, has he? I think maybe put a bit of trust in him and a bit of faith in the next couple of weeks, alongside another specialist centre-back in Kabak, and just see how they go. And then I think the real shame is that Liverpool are going to have to do this at a time when Henderson's not there available to play midfield. It's forced an injury to him for them to actually play two specialist centre-backs. And that for me is probably the biggest shame, I think, of the last few weeks. So, it's going to have to be Phillips and Kabak, I think.
Joe, if it is Ben Davies or isn't Ben Davies, that's a big question for Jurgen Klopp to answer. But let's say that he goes with Nat Phillips. Can you see a situation where Ben Davies doesn't then get a chance in this one? Maybe he doesn't get a chance in the one after it. You're starting to look at it and think, when does Ben Davies get a chance? If this isn't his game, then what is?
Look, I don't think we should get too hung up on when Ben Davies gets a chance. I think it was quite obvious he was a calculated gamble. He came in from the Championship for a very low fee, and he came in at a time that Liverpool needed bodies more than anything. So, at the end of the day, he's another option on the bench, and you can put Nat Phillips in the team. I never really expected Ben Davies to come in, and I saw people saying on deadline day it could be another masterstroke, but I think that was always going to be a bit overstated. He was a gamble. Liverpool would never have bought him had they not been in the position that they were in with injuries. And he's just another body on the bench. For me, it's about getting Kabak and Nat Phillips together now, trying to give them a run of games and trying to bite the bullet with those two and get them playing and get them to start, thinking about a partnership there, because they're going to have to. And, unless he does get Fabinho back in and bring him back into defence, personally, I'd like to see them lean towards two specialist centre-halves. And when it comes to Nat Phillips, I don't think he's put a foot wrong. I think there's some concerns perhaps over his pace, that sort of thing, when they play quicker or teams higher up the table. But I certainly think against Sheffield United, that should suit him. And, I don't think he's not the greatest passer of the ball, but I don't think he's done anything wrong. He's pretty good in the air. He's a good tackler. Yeah, he's not someone for the long term for Liverpool, but I would rather see Nat Phillips get a little run now. So, look, it's not ideal, but as I said, I wouldn't get hung up over Ben Davies. I just think he's an option and he's a body on the bench, and that's the way Klopp will see it now. I don't really think there's any great need to give him a chance. But as Gorsty said before, I think it's about using two specialist centre halves now, because just when you thought we might be able to do that with Henderson, it's they're not being able to move him to midfield. So get those two together, get a run of games in them, and just see how they get on. And then if you have to bring Fabinho back into there, they'll have to do it. But yeah, Phillips and Kabak for me at the weekend is a must really now.
I was just going to ask you as well, David, about Ozan Kabak. Obviously had a mixed time so far. It's a very difficult situation to come into. How can Liverpool fans sort of assess how good he is? Because, as we say, it's such a strange situation. It's almost a very difficult one to try and assess.
Yeah, I think the same goes to the manager as well, in terms of I suppose training is going to be a massive part of whether he earns himself a permanent move here, because I think, judging by the games and coming into a very unbalanced Liverpool side, a side that doesn't give him much protection, or not as well as it did last season, it's really difficult for him. And, we do forget the fact that this lad is just 20 years old and hasn't got great experience of a side that should be winning every week, coming from Schalke, where he really found things difficult. So, it's going to be really hard to judge him. I think we can already take some sort of level of insight into whether he'll end up at Liverpool just on the basis of them really pushing for that option to buy rather than obligation. I think that says a lot about that Liverpool felt they were in a bit of a corner. They needed to get someone in. We know that his representatives were basically offering him around over the summer as well. So it was someone they knew was available to them. So yeah, in terms of whether that leads to something permanent, I don't know. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to prove it on the pitch, just because of what the team is doing at the moment. I think some of the moments he's had where he's possibly had unfair stick is I'm thinking about that Leicester goal. The keeper possibly takes a lot more blame for that than me. And then I saw he got slaughtered after the opening goal for Everton the other day, and I thought that was quite unfair. I thought the midfield in the build up to that and just getting back into shape was an absolute mess, in my opinion. And he shouldn't put it on a young defender, the fact that he's got James Rodriguez in front of him, the ability with so much space to pick that through ball, and back any of us to play that pass. It was, and for someone of that quality, it was just easy. So anyone can play that pass not under pressure. So it's not on the centre half to somehow cut that out. It's impossible. So I think I think it's going to be interesting. I think Klopp will stick with him for the remainder, just to sort of see where he's up to. He doesn't have a lot of options otherwise, and the fact that he can stay fit is a major bonus. So I think we'll see a lot more of him. But whether it's the matches themselves that necessarily decide whether he stays or not, I'm not particularly convinced. I think it's more what he does in training and showing there.
I think what we've learned there is Dave Lynch has never seen me play football, has he? He's never seen me play.
Let's move on to some more sort of positive news in terms of injuries. Diogo Jota, of course, Gorsty, is back. He's been training, I think, since Wednesday morning. So what's that? 2 sessions. He'll have another session tomorrow, possibly another one later today. Is that a big boost for Liverpool? I think it's probably a good thing in one sense that you get him back, you get an option, but at the same time, there's probably a big expectation on his shoulders for the rest of this season.
I think there is, yeah, and understandably, to be fair, Liverpool, the only goal they've scored at Anfield this year, which I still find remarkable, I've written it a few times, and talking about it now, was Salah against Man City. Nearly 9 hours of football without a goal, and Liverpool don't really seem to have tried anything different in that time. They just seem to be banging their heads against the brick wall every single game, and it's the same story. Aimless crosses are coming in, hopeful punts forward, balls over the top. They're not really creating too much. Teams are content to sit in, get men behind the ball, defend, and wait for the chances, and that seems to be Liverpool's downfall at the moment. So Jota coming back, even if Liverpool was still in a good position, you'd be looking forward to seeing him getting, hitting the ground running again. He scored 9 goals before he got injured, which is some return really when you think it was only really 2 months. 2 months he had in his Liverpool career, just a little bit over 2 months between him making his debut and that Michelin game. But I think it offers Klopp a chance to mix it up, particularly at a time when Henderson's out and Fabinho's out. So the midfield numbers are going to be a little bit light anyway. It gives him the opportunity to perhaps go to that almost 4-2-4 formation that you've seen him play against Manchester City when Liverpool looked really dangerous, particularly in the first half. So for me, I can't wait to see him back. I'm not too sure how much he'll play on Sunday. I think they might be keeping him in reserve for that massive game against Chelsea on Thursday, and I think they might back the front three to get them the points against Sheffield United, because the home form hasn't been too bad, has it? The 2 wins that they've had this year in the Premier League have been at West Ham and against Tottenham, who the teams who are around them in the Premier League. So I think if they can't get a result on Sunday, then Liverpool really are in trouble. And then I think they might just be keeping Jota in reserve for that massive game next week.
Yeah, Joe, as Gorsty says there, it's been very predictable at times from Liverpool. I mean, they can move to a 4-2-4, 4-2-3-1 type thing. They can also change things up with Jota. It's almost like a double boost in that sense, that it gives them options for the first time in a long time to just do something a little bit different.
Definitely. Personally, I'd be looking to try and get Firmino out the firing line in the not too distant future. I think he's really struggled recently. I thought he had a really poor game in the derby. I just think he looks shattered. I mean, it's not a surprise. A lot of Liverpool's players must be absolutely shattered, but I think he's somebody who, you see the difference, don't you? When Firmino doesn't play well, I think Liverpool tend to not play well, and he just seems to be snatching at things, not quite confident. And I know he set the goal up against Leicester with a really great touch, but his all-round play just doesn't seem right at the moment. And you hope that Jota comes back in the same sort of form and with the same sort of mindset that he had in the first half of the season, because he just looked like a breath of fresh air. He was confident in himself, and Liverpool need that in their front three right now. I think Salah aside, the other two have struggled and just look a little bit lacking in confidence. So, but other than that, I mean, the goal scoring problems they're so hard to explain, really, aren't they? Because if you look back, there was obviously the 7-0, which Liverpool looked absolutely deadly in, and then after that, from that West Brom game, you think back to that, and I think we've seen that game at Anfield so many times before, when a team has sat in and defended for their lives. But Liverpool's confidence just seems to dry up in one game, and away from home they've done all right in Tottenham and West Ham, but them aside, they just don't look like scoring. And at Anfield, they look out of ideas. It's very reminiscent to me of 02-03, when they were quite good, Liverpool, and then just hit the most dreadful run of form and just forgot how to score and had a lot of problems. And yeah, I just think Jota coming back gives them a boost. Hopefully injects a bit of confidence into a front three that looks like it's lacking it at the moment, and allows them to rotate them a little bit, bring Firmino out, and then you also strengthen the bench, don't you? Because I think in the last couple of games, Liverpool's bench, I mean, looked at the bench in the derby, and it looked so, with respect to the people on the bench, weak compared to how they started the season. So it gives Liverpool more options there. But the goal scoring problems, as Gorst, he said, it's absolutely bizarre, at Anfield, and even the Salah one was a penalty, wasn't it? So it's so tough to explain. I think there's a number of factors in there, but yeah, Jota couldn't really come back any sooner, and I think I'd agree they probably will back others to do the job. I wouldn't expect them to start on Sunday, but yeah, Chelsea they might have one eye on, and hopefully another player that we might touch on him later, that that can hopefully sort these goal scoring issues might be Keita, who played in that 7-0 and does offer Liverpool something more progressive on the ball. So, it might be time to get him back in, and hopefully he can have an impact as well.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on Naby Keita a little bit later. Roberto Firmino, though, David, is someone I wanted to go into just off the back of the Jota stuff. He's played all 17 games, Firmino, since Jota got injured on December the 9th. I think 14 of those have been starts. The other 3 he's come off the bench. I suppose that sort of explains to some extent why he looks so tired, because Liverpool just haven't had any other options in that period for him to have a rest at all.
Yeah, exactly. And in this type of season, it's unprecedented, really, isn't it? The fixture schedule in this season. It's absolutely no surprise whatsoever that he's really feeling that pace, because, not only has he played all those games, which ideally Klopp would have avoided doing, he's also, such a hard worker, a presser. He covers gaps all the time. He puts in the hard work, vacates the space for Salah and Mane all the time. So it's, he gets about the pitch a lot. So, for him to have played that many games back to back and then, not get that rest, it's no wonder really that his performances are dropping off. I suppose there is a wider discussion to be had about him and his long-term future. I think in terms of that front 3, I think he's the one who's had possibly the lowest peak of the 3 in terms of, being world class at their absolute best. And he's probably the one who's on his way down first, and the one that Liverpool would look to move out of that front 3 first of any of them. And I think that conversation is still to be had, but maybe Jota's the man who replaces him. But I think that's something that doesn't need to happen immediately in the short term. I think Jurgen Klopp looked at his options there and thought he could integrate Jota slowly and use him and have that rotational option there and get the absolute most out of Firmino this season. But obviously that knee injury has completely denied him the option to do that. But I think he's still got great Liverpool performances in him. I don't think they'll be looking to sell him this summer or anything like that. I just think it's a case of Jota coming back could be a real boost for Firmino, and even if that means him missing a few games, because when he does come in, he should be fresh and at his best, and that'll be good for Liverpool.
Yeah, Roberto Firmino, Gorsty, going to be a big beneficiary of Jota coming back. But Sadio Mane as well. He's only scored 3 Premier League goals since Jota got injured. He's sort of been having a relatively poor spell himself compared to his usual high standards, at least. Is there a little bit of scrutiny maybe needed on his performances? And could Jota provide the answer to that sort of question that Liverpool have as well?
Yeah, I think you're right, Matt, actually. I think Mane has gone under the radar slightly, with probably because of how more glaringly obvious it's become the Firmino struggling almost week by week. I mean, Firmino's not someone who you associate with scoring tons of goals, but just by watching him, you can see what he brings to this Liverpool front 3. And over the last few months, passes have started going astray and he's losing the ball, and he's never really looked confident when he's shooting, which for me has probably been the biggest thing. Whenever he's having a shot, it never really looks like he thinks he can score. So that's been a bit more obvious. Mane has gone kind of, can we say, got away with it slightly because of how much scrutiny Firmino's come under. I mean, I think a lot of Mane's good points come from, the overlapping that Robertson provides, and I don't think that's been as perfectly in sync as it has in previous years. I remember the Manchester United game at Anfield. Liverpool had acres across that left side. Paul Pogba was stationed on the right and didn't really fancy doing the dirty work of running back with Robertson, and him and Mane just had acres and acres for most of the game and never used it to full advantage at all. And some of that was down to Firmino. Actually, there was a couple of chances where he could have laid either of them in and didn't. But yeah, I mean, I suppose the one player who has kept the standards up in that front 3 since the turn of the year has been Salah. And I do think that maybe a little bit more could be made of Mane's struggles as well. But, that when players are this good, it doesn't take a whole lot for it to change quickly, does it? I mean, we could be looking at it on Sunday and both Firmino and Mane have scored within 25 minutes, and Liverpool are questioning what the issue ever was. But until that happens, the critiques will go on. But yeah, I do think there's something in that with Mane.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we finish on Jota, Joe, I was going to ask you about the importance. I know you touched on this earlier, but the importance of getting him on the pitch just for a few minutes, even on Sunday, with that game against Chelsea in mind, because that Chelsea game, we're obviously going to go into it in more detail next week, but it seems to get bigger and bigger the more you think about it.
Yeah, it's looming, isn't it? I think, as Dave touched on before, I think without Henderson, Liverpool face a really, really difficult task to try and get into the top four now. I think, the just momentum doesn't seem to be with them. And I think, that just is a must-win game. You need to knock one of your rivals off. And having lost to Everton, I think you need to go and beat Chelsea and deal a blow. Just to give yourselves confidence more than anything. I think if Liverpool can't overcome Chelsea, especially at home, that they'll really question whether they can put a run together and get back into the top four. Obviously, it is an odd season, and we've seen the league table change a lot this season. But yeah, I think that game looms large now for Liverpool. And yeah, you'd want Jota. You just want a few minutes into him. The best scenario would be Liverpool would sort of cruising, and they could get him on 10, 15 minutes to go and just, get confidence into him. But yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? You don't want to risk him as well. The way injuries have gone, the last thing you want to do is sort of tempt another one. But that Chelsea game's massive. But Sheffield United is a tricky one. I don't think Liverpool should take it for granted. They struggled there last season. They obviously they won with that one Elton goal that slipped through the goalkeeper's hands. Sheffield United can make it difficult for teams, and even though they've had a terrible season, I don't think. I think they still make life difficult for teams. I still think they make you work for wins. So I think it could be quite a tough one at the weekend, and I think Liverpool just need to get through that game. To take a 1-0 now, wouldn't they, and then get into that Chelsea game. And you never know, if they can win against Sheffield United, go into the Chelsea game on a bit of a high, they could start turning things around. But they face a big task. Jota will be massively central to that if they can do it.
And just quickly, David, on Chelsea as well. I mean, it's a big couple of weeks for them. I mean, they play Manchester United on Sunday just before that Liverpool-Sheffield United game. They then obviously play Liverpool on the Thursday. They've then got Everton and Leeds. There's a game with Atletico Madrid in there as well. It sort of feels like if Liverpool are going to gain ground on Chelsea, this might be the period in which they have to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. They had a very sort of kind start really for Tuchel, didn't they? In terms of the fixture list, it was a lot of games that you would expect Chelsea to win, and they won a lot of them, and so that builds confidence and things. But then, obviously, when they come into the tougher games, and I thought against Atletico, that's a fantastic result away from home, isn't it? Against them, even though you don't have the crowd, and I think to beat them on their own patch. Knowing how Atletico approach these games and what happened with Liverpool last season there, where they found it really tough to find goals against them. That's quite an impressive result, and maybe a little bit worrying for Liverpool coming into facing them. I still think Chelsea are early days, aren't they? So under a new manager, so it'll take time, and I think Liverpool can catch them going into that tough run and get a win, then it would really sort of change the complexion of their battle in the table. I think it is vital for Liverpool to get something if they are going to put a run together. But the fact that you're looking at this and Chelsea are above Liverpool in the table in comparison to where the two sides were at the start of the season when they faced each other and what you expected their relative seasons to go, it just sort of says how mad football is and what injuries have done to this Liverpool team. It's difficult, and I think for Liverpool, if they're going to have a chance at top four, if they're going to have a chance of getting a run together of maybe 5 games where they don't get a fresh injury, and maybe 4 or 5 wins will put you back in that top 4 mix. And I think one of them does have to be against Chelsea because they're going to be one of the sides pushing. I think you question whether West Ham will last the pace just because of what their squad is in comparison to the teams around them. But Chelsea look the likeliest, don't they, to knock Liverpool out of that top 4. So if that's the case, then not beating them at home would be a major hammer blow to Liverpool.
Yeah, it's a difficult couple of games, I think, coming up for West Ham as well. Obviously, Manchester City for them tomorrow lunchtime, so possibly Liverpool looking to City to do them a little bit of a favour in that regard. Let's talk, though, about Sheffield United. Gorsty, what have you made of Chris Wilder's team so far this season? It seems like a long time ago now that Wilder and Klopp were going head-to-head over the 5 subs rule, but it was only a few months ago.
It does, yeah. Whenever I've seen them, they just look completely toothless. Ryan Brewster obviously come in for quite a lot of money, but it was huge expectations on a player who hadn't made his debut in the Premier League, I think, at the time, around about 25 million, wasn't it? Ollie McBurney, David McGoldrick, players who don't really strike fear into the heart of opposition defenders, if that's not being too harsh. But this is a Liverpool defence that hasn't got its stellar names in, is it really? So Liverpool will be a little bit mindful of that. But if Liverpool are serious about being in this top 4, they've just got to go and win. Sheffield United, up until a point, they're a decent outfit, and you've got a handful of players who are quite good. I like the look of Sanderberg in midfield whenever I've seen him, but as I say, they don't really seem like a team who score a lot. So if Liverpool can make the most of whatever spaces are afforded to them, then I expect Liverpool to come away from Bramall Lane with 3 points, and I think it'll be a lot easier than it was last season when Liverpool really made to work for it and only come away with the win because of a Dean Henderson mistake, if you remember that game. So, as Klopp said today, it'll be a fight. I mean, it always is when teams are scrapping for anything down there. But for what I have seen of Sheffield United this season, they don't really look like they're going to score more than one, shall we say? And Liverpool have got to take advantage of it.
Yeah, only 15 goals scored in the Premier League this season, Joe. The lowest amount. You wouldn't have thought this would be the hardest test for Liverpool's defence, but it's more the other end, isn't it? There's a bit of a narrative that Liverpool, well, quite rightly, a narrative that Liverpool can't really break down a low block. And I think there's 5 or 6 teams that have conceded fewer goals than Sheffield United. So they're not getting beat 3 and 4 every week. It is very much a case of the odd goal here and there.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at before. Just that they are the type of side that they don't threaten a lot, but they make you work for it. And, I thought last season they obviously overperformed a lot, and they've sort of reverted to how I think most people thought they'd be this season. But yeah, I don't think it will be an easy game, and I don't expect, you wouldn't even expect if Liverpool were in great form for them to go there and swat them aside. But the form Liverpool have been in, I don't expect Liverpool to go and win by any big margin. I think they'd take a 1-0 now and be done with it. So yeah, I think it'd be a difficult one. Obviously, there was a bit of needle between Klopp and Wilder earlier this season, and he's a funny one. Wilder, I can't say I like him. I think he's one of those English managers who likes to say it like it is, but really like to try and wind up other managers. He was giving Klopp things like he's a selfish politician, wasn't he? Stuff like that earlier this season, which I just thought was, I think if Klopp went round labelling like Chris Wilder a selfish politician, I think there'd be uproar. But I think it's okay when the manager of Sheffield United likes to have digs at the top managers. So I thought that was all a bit strange, and perhaps just Chris Wilder's attempt at making a bit of a name for himself. So yeah, there was a bit of needle there, but Sheffield United, I just think will make life difficult for Liverpool. It's not going to be the most exciting game, but if Liverpool can win, that's really all that matters now, isn't it? I think ugly wins will be the way forward for Liverpool from this point onwards in this season.
And just before we move on to team selections then, David, a quick word on Ryan Brewster. Gorst, you mentioned him earlier, still yet to score for Sheffield United. Can we learn anything from that transfer move yet, or is it a little bit too soon to possibly judge his time at Sheffield United?
I think the player himself will be sort of a little bit worried at the moment in terms of how it's panned out. I did sort of wonder at the time he made his move, was there a clear plan for him there at Sheffield United? I don't think he's the type of striker they've used in their time in the league. I don't think I've seen any evidence that they want to play those little through balls in behind that he feeds on and did so well, for example, at Swansea on. They're not going to give him chances to do that. They really want to make triangles, don't they, out on the wings, and then try and get the ball in the box. Now, Ryan Brewster's never ever going to win those, and so the idea that they signed him thinking that that's what he was going to be is crazy to me, and sort of unfortunate for the player, because it's hard to see how he gets his opportunities. Maybe things change. I suppose when they get relegated, maybe he's proven he's a prolific Championship striker. So maybe Chris Wilder has a plan for him when that comes around. But yeah, it's just been a bizarre move at the moment because he's such a big talent. And I think there were other teams in for him that would have been a better fit for him. Had he maybe gone to Swansea permanently, that would have made a lot more sense to me than ending up at Sheffield United. But it looks like another masterstroke from Michael Edwards, doesn't it, in terms of getting the fee he got, and in terms of what Sheffield United have got out of that so far. It's just a shame to see a young player with so much talent sort of struggling as he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed for him. He can turn it around just possibly after this weekend, if that would help Liverpool out. Let's move on to our team selections then. Gorsty, I'll come to you first, and we'll leave the goalkeeper decision, I should say, to one side for obvious reasons. Of course, we extend our best wishes to Alisson this week. But across the defence, there's a couple of things, as we touched on before, to decide upon. Which back four, if it is a back four for you, I assume it is, are you going to go for?
It's just the same conundrum, isn't it, that it is every week now, is what centre-back pairing is going to be out there. And Klopp said for a while it's pretty much been, the last man standing, get out there and get on the pitch. But it's 2 from 3, and none of the 3 are kind of standout candidates, are they? Kabak, Nat Phillips, or a debut for Ben Davies. But I'm going to stick with Kabak and Phillips, and hopefully they've got enough to shut the door against Sheffield United.
I'm going to go for Ben Davies, Joe. I know you argued the opposite earlier. I just think this might be the sort of opponent that he could work against. But I assume you're going to go for Nat Phillips?
You love him, don't you? Guy's got in your head because he's seen him a couple of times. But he's a lad from, no offence, he's just a lad from the Championship. I just think Nat Phillips, there's nothing wrong with him. And I think he's not put a foot wrong since playing for Liverpool, Phillips, this season, in terms of what he's been asked to do. So, he gets the nod from me, and Kabak. Yeah, it sort of has to be, doesn't it, really? As Dave was saying before about Kabak, I'd be very surprised if Liverpool took him unless he's doing something brilliant in training. I think he's on a hiding to nothing at the moment in the team that he's in. And I think if Liverpool had wanted him, they might have gone for him last summer, but we'll see. But yeah, I just think it has to be them two. I don't see the point in throwing Ben Davies in just because you like him, Matt.
The only reason I'm going for him is because I just think...
Because Guy said he was good.
If you've no intention of playing him, why bother bringing him in January? I mean, if ever there's a game for him, I think it's probably the worst team in the division that you put him in for.
It's because they were down to the under-9s, Matt, with the centre-half. They had no one left.
That's what I mean. If he doesn't get a chance now, then what was the point in buying him?
Maybe so.
Lynchy, who are you going to go for?
I don't really want to come down on either side here, lads. I don't want to cause any further rift. No, I think to be honest with the Ben Davies thing, I think there's a real possibility he doesn't play for Liverpool this season. To be honest, I don't see it as a sensible situation where Klopp brings him into the team. That's what I find. It's just. There's no obvious game where he comes in. I think you play Kabak until the end of the season now. He is obviously the one of the two that Klopp wants to play, and I think you maybe put Phillips next to him because I just don't see what he's done wrong in recent games when he's come in, and more change at the back is probably not the way forward. So go with the side that you ended up finishing against Everton.
You've just ruined Matt's day. Look at his face.
Lynchy, don't say that about Ben Davies, by the way. I've got 2,000 words to go as soon as he makes his debut.
How are you going to even? How can you even repurpose that? That is a nightmare.
No, I'm sure we'll see him at some point. Gorsty, midfield.
Again, it's 3 of 4 with Oxlade-Chamberlain or Curtis Jones, I guess, isn't it? As much as I'd like to give Thiago a breather for a bit, you can't, can you? So it's going to have to be Wijnaldum again, Thiago again, and probably Curtis Jones above Oxlade.
Is Naby Keita back now? I think I'm right in saying he is, isn't he?
Yeah, he's back in training, actually. I didn't think of that, but I don't know. He hasn't played since Palace, has he? Which is well over 2 months ago now. So maybe you could keep him for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Joe, which configuration in the middle? Is there a change of formation, or are you going to go with a 3?
No, I'm going to go with a 3. I'd lash Keita in. I mean, he's been training a bit now, hasn't he? Good 10 days or so, Keita, I think. But he came back in the last week and then missed.
Start, didn't he?
But, he was ill, wasn't he? He got ill after he came back.
They did leave him out of the game to stay and train, didn't they, with the Leipzig game? So I would try and get him back in just to freshen up the midfield a little bit. And Keita, Jones, Keita, Wijnaldum, Thiago, just for the experience. It's difficult, isn't it? Because Wijnaldum, if he leaves Liverpool this summer, they'll have ground him into paste by the time he leaves because he's just not allowed a break, is he? The poor fella can't catch one. The amount of people who go down injured every time you think you can take him out. So Wijnaldum, and then like Gorst, he says it. I'd like to give Thiago a break, but you can't really. And I think Keita, if he comes in, his natural fit is in the more advanced role in midfield, and that's where Jones has played. So I'd have Wijnaldum sitting though. I think it looks a little bit better when you have Wijnaldum sitting and Thiago a little bit more advanced, and then Keita was the most advanced of the 3.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Wijnaldum at the base with Thiago and Curtis Jones. I'm not sure this is the perfect one for Naby Keita, but Lynchy, your midfield, are you going to go for a 3 as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think Keita, I think they do need to get him back in as soon as possible, just to give them an option till the end of the season. The last thing Jurgen Klopp needs is any more injuries in any part of the pitch. So to get Keita in as a rotational option is massive. So if they can get him off the bench here for a half an hour or so, that would be an absolutely massive boost, I think. But I think in terms of starting, I don't think Curtis Jones has done anything wrong, and I don't think he deserves to lose his starting spot, really. I think the one who's possibly under pressure in that midfield is actually Thiago in terms of his actual performances. I thought it wasn't fantastic against Everton, to be honest, from that first moment onwards. But I do think this game in particular could really suit him, actually, even possibly being used as that deeper lying midfielder, because I don't expect Sheffield United to want a lot of the ball in this, and he'll be able to just sit there, play his passes, orchestrate things. The sort of game that we saw him in early in his Liverpool career, where he looked so bright in those cameos. So I think this could really suit him down to the ground. So I think maybe stick with that midfield 3 again, and hopefully get a different result this time around.
Yeah, and I assume, Gorsty, we're going to go for the usual front 3. If anyone's got any objections, then you can shout up. But I think given that is the case, we'll move on to some score predictions. I'm going to go for a narrow 1-0 to Liverpool win. I don't think it's going to be much more than that, to be honest. But I think Liverpool would take that. Gorsty, what are you going to go for?
Yeah, I'm going to go with you, actually. I think it'll be another tight one, but I think Liverpool will just have enough just to squeeze by in this one and move on to the big one next Thursday.
Joe, what's your score prediction, and how many is Ben Davies going to score?
Yeah, he'll get the only one in that 1-0 win. Yeah, I think it will be 1-0. I feel bad on Ben. I'm not dismissing Ben Davies, by the way. It's just your enthusiasm for him is I don't really know where it's come from. It just seems a bit odd. But yeah, no, I think they'll win 1-0. By the way, just we were doing team selection. Someone tweeted this to us before, and I hadn't totally thought about it. He said, "Do you think Liverpool will play my dream team this season?" Which they won't. Which was Alisson in goal, Trent and Robbo fullbacks. He'd put Matip and Van Dijk together in defence, and then the midfield, usual front 3, and then midfield 3 of Thiago, Fabinho, and Henderson. And you're thinking that probably is on paper the team. Well, Gomez perhaps, or other than Matip, Liverpool's strongest team they would have gone into the season with, and they won't be able to play it once all season, because I think the closest they came was the first derby when Adrian played in goal, and the rest of that was the same team, and then Chelsea away. But I think Gomez may have missed that one.
Yeah, they did. Fabinho played centre back.
Fabinho played centre back, didn't he? So it says a lot, doesn't it, about Liverpool's problems, I think, and anyone that. I've seen quite a few rival fans snorting and laughing at Liverpool and saying injuries aren't an excuse. But, I think it says a lot that Liverpool, by the time they finish the season, won't have put out what most of us would probably deem their strongest team on paper out once all season. it's crazy. You know, like there's not been a season like it, certainly in my lifetime, in terms of injuries for Liverpool. But yeah, to answer your question, 1-0.
And to finish us off, Lynchy, what are you going to go for?
Yeah, do you know what? Just on Joe's point, actually, it's not even necessarily they've not even put their best team out. They haven't even got close, have they, for most of the games throughout this. It's interesting, and if having world class players available wasn't important, then the transfer window obviously wouldn't exist. So anyway, back to your actual point, which was the score. I think I know it's not everyone's favourite stat, but Liverpool recently have been massively underperforming their expected goals, and I think at some point, surely it's got to turn. They have been getting chances. We forget this, even though the performances haven't been amazing. They have been getting chances. Maybe this is the game where a couple just go in and they get a comfortable win. So I'm probably wrong, but I'm going to go for 2-0 to Liverpool.
Yeah, my favourite stat of this week is that the 2 out of the top 3 most underperforming in terms of XG in the league are Sadio Mane and Roberto Firmino, but the other one is Kevin De Bruyne, which is interesting. Anyway, that just about brings us to the end of today's podcast. We'll, of course, be back on Monday to look back at Sunday night's game at Bramall Lane, rather. For now, though, from myself, Matt Addison, if I can speak properly, Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and David Lynch. Until next time here on the Blood Red channel, thank you for watching and listening, and goodbye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.